I won't deny it, I'm a Southsider. You don't wanna mess with me. Got the police looking for me. But I'm calm cause I'm smoking that CBD. Said I won't deny it, I'm a Southsider. You don't wanna mess with me. Got the police looking for me. But I'm chilling in the back of the VIP. Said we won't deny it, we are Southsiders. You don't wanna mess with us. Got the police looking for us. But there's nothing that they can't do. Cause you're chilling with the Blessed Life Podcast crew. The Blue Podcast, Piches Cabrones. Piches Cabrones. Feliz Domingo, mis amigos. Welcome to the Blue Podcast. I'm Brian Tierney. This is the Blessed Life University Podcast, the Blue Podcast for short. Today, Matt and I are going to be talking about the Ukrainian offensive right now. Stuff that's going on with Putin, Russia, and nuclear threats, and also interest rate increases. Here with me to talk about all this today is Matt Thomassen, also known as Mateo. Last few topics: the Ukrainian offensive, Putin, nuclear threats, and the interest rate increase.
So, yeah, I didn't research it really in depth, but I've heard on the news, the headlines are, the Ukrainians mounted a counter-offensive and retook formerly held Russian areas of their country back. That's pretty cool. The Ukrainians definitely have their shit together in the battlefield, so props to them. It's just this whole thing with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I really was surprised to see just kind of. I think it's a combination of things. I think it's a combination of Ukrainians' ability to muster their forces and put together, extremely, impressive military response to the invasion, punching above their weight, military with their numbers for what they have in their arsenal. And it's also almost as much, if not more so, the Russians' ineptitude and squandering the assets which they have at their disposal. They have a strange military system. They don't have NCOs. For the people that don't know, NCO is for non-commissioned officer. We call them the backbone of the army. Officers like myself, we're the eggheads, the brains. We do the planning. We issue the orders, and we supervise and refine. But the NCOs execute the orders, and essentially they're the drivers of the pace in terms of military operations. They're on the ground with the troops, with your lower enlisted, ensuring they complete the mission. So the Russians just have officers and enlisted. They don't have NCOs, which are essentially like your middling ranks. They're the connector between the troops that are front line. They're the conduit between the troops that are in front line, Joe Snuffy, a private that's slinging a fucking rifle in a backpack across the mountains, and the officers like me who are out back at the TOC at the HQ who are thinking about things with their fucking supposedly big brains, and making the plans. But the NCOs are the ones that are ensuring that the mission intent is actually carried out, and they're looking after soldiers, making sure soldiers are prepared at the ground level and executing the mission. So they don't have NCOs, and I think that might have been a mistake, from the looks of it. You really need NCOs, because if you don't have those are your most seasoned, experienced enlisted soldiers, and these guys have the real world knowledge, the subject matter expertise to actually apply what it takes to complete the mission. And if you don't have that, I get it. They're on the other side of the country. They do things different. The other side of the world, they do things differently there. So, but maybe they should rethink that after this giant clusterfuck.
Let's not give them Russian military tips, but yes.
yeah. I think they've already started to realize, and it's not just that. It's not just the force structure they have. It's corruption within the ranks. It's lack of morale. From what I've heard, this is maybe this is a generalization, but this is kind of like America invading Canada. We're not that different from the Canadians. The Russians are that different from the Ukrainians, and vice versa. I know personally I wouldn't be very excited about invading Canada. I'd be like, what in the fuck are we doing? This makes no sense. It's just a power grab. These are our brothers, our cousins. These are they're not far removed from us. So I understand that there's extreme problem in morale The Russian forces, they don't want to be here. A lot of them are conscripts. They don't want to be invading this essentially a somewhat of a sister or cousin country to them. So I understand that it's a problem on all ends, and they haven't maintained their equipment. They haven't done. I mean, this is just. I mean, in my old unit, we would do, PMCS vehicles, preventive maintenance checks and services, fucking acronyms. You never learn them all. But they're basically vehicle inspection, making sure your equipment functions properly. So you do those. You're supposed to do them like every month, every drill. PMCS your Humvees, fucking starting them up, make sure they have fluids, check the tires, make sure they have all the kit that's required in them. Russians ain't been doing that. They've probably been doing shit like the Afghans did, where they like sell fuel and sell things that you could get money for, to pocket it. So there's corruption in the ranks like that, where they've sold off their equipment for their own personal profit and stuff. So it's and you don't even do PMCSs. Well, if you let your vehicles go, what happens? Everything breaks down over time. Tires included. You don't change your tires. You have convoys breaking down because their tires fucking pop because their sidewalls are all cracked. They got dry rot on them. Just basic stuff like that. And they don't plan and resource their fuel. So you have tanks that run out of fuel on your way into country. No logistics. Broadcasting unencrypted data, or broadcasting tactical data on unencrypted channels. Not using frequency hopping and encryption on your radio comms. I mean, this is like armying 101 that they can't do, or at least this is more early war. Maybe they've learned now. It seems to be more of an actual kind of even fight, but it's pretty incredible how ate the fuck up they were. And I really expected them to just kind of overrun Ukraine because they had all the tools at their disposal. I mean, if they actually used the assets they had and maintained the assets they had and implemented their battle strategy according to their doctrinal military strategy, they should have already taken over the entire country with the superior numbers and firepower that they have. So they just snatched defeat out of the jaws of victory, apparently. So it's pretty crazy.
We're all glad that as the rest of the world, we stand with Ukraine, and we're glad to hear that that's the way it went.
It's far from over
to invade. Yeah, very far from over, and surprising as well, because I was really concerned when this was starting, and I was concerned when they were talking about the Russian military buildup on the border, and
we knew
you hear something like that, and then you're like, okay, you almost don't even need the commentators to tell you that there's going to be a problem. Like, they're gearing up to do something, right? This is not a normal exercise, whatever. This is real fucking life. So I felt that the Ukrainians kind of should have met them at the border type of thing, as opposed to they waited till the invasion occurred. So I thought, okay, the Ukrainians are fighting, they're backpedaling, they're fighting off their back foot, which is like not the ideal position to be in if you're a fighter. If you're like a boxer or a mixed martial artist, like you'd rather be the one imposing and pushing forward than having to backpedal and react. So I'm thinking, Jesus, they're already at a disadvantage because the first move has been made, and they weren't ready to counteract it immediately. But like some kind of movie, they've been able to mount a crazy defense. Even though they weren't the first ones to strike, or at least meet that first strike right away. The Russian military built up there for quite a long time on the border, over a month, maybe it was several months, and eventually started moving over the border. Like, there was that waiting period of, I wonder, what is the rationale? It's like, we don't want this to be true, so we're not going to react to it, because if we react to it, it makes it even more true. But I feel like that's not the best, but hats off to the Ukrainian people and leadership for fighting an incredible battle against a larger, more well-armed opponent.
Yeah, and we're going to be capitalizing on this status quo. I think if we had really tried to come to a diplomatic resolution where Russia just leaves, we say, hey, you know what? NATO's off the table for Ukraine. Why don't you guys, you don't have to worry about Ukraine being a NATO country. Let's just end this fucking war. Because I know that's what you're worried about, Putin, asshole. Like, he's overreacting to losing an influence battle. We had a pro-American government pop up in Ukraine. Putin lost an influence battle, so he rage quit, threw the fucking controller at the TV, and invaded because he couldn't exert influence over the Ukraine to the extent that we have. So what's happening now is, now that this is my tinfoil hat theory, now that we're out of the Middle Eastern conflict, in Iraq and Afghanistan, we need a new way of greasing the palms of the MIC, the military-industrial complex. And this is a great ways to do it. So we're going to be making it rain buku bucks on defense contractors to send weapons to Ukraine, and it's in the interests of the MIC to continue this conflict for as long as possible. We just had a forever war, in Afghanistan, come to a resolution, and it's like, oh, where's the next market? There's no longer the political will and stomach with the American people to deploy American troops to a bullshit conflict. However, this legitimate conflict with Ukraine, Ukraine being the good guys, basically Russia being the bad guys, it's an easy sell. Ukraine's in the right, Russia's in the wrong, they invaded. So we're going to send them a shitload of weapons, and it's in defense contractors' best interest to have this continue for as long as possible. So even though I think we could diplomatically, if the administration was interested, if the powers, I wouldn't even say the administration, but I'd say the powers that be in this country were interested in resolving this conflict, we could have done it already and just agreed, say, hey, look, Ukraine stays out of NATO, not going to be a NATO member, withdraw your forces, we can end it. Instead, we're keeping it going. And escalation. Now we've got fucking nuclear threats being traded back and forth. Zelensky's like, oh, Russia needs to be punished, blah, blah, blah. Putin's like, we'll use all the fucking weapons at our disposal. If you want to go there, we'll go there. So, and now we're just at this level of talking shit, throwing up, saying it without saying it, like the nuclear word, the N word, basically. So, what did he say? Putin said what do you have here? With a threat to the territorial integrity of our country to protect Russia and our people, we of course will use all the means at our disposal. This is not a bluff. So they're saying he's referencing nuclear weapons. Then they're also saying that Zelensky, saying that Russia be punished, was saying that we should nuke Russia on Ukraine's behalf. And so we have all these fucking assholes with their shit talking. And it's pretty crazy that we're even talking about this, and in this day and age, talking about the N-word, the big nuke threat. I thought that was hopefully a thing of the past since the fall of the Soviet Union, but here we are again, lobbing these threats, and I hope it doesn't come to that, because that's end of the world stuff. We even have people over here talking about, okay, could we do a preemptive nuclear strike and all that? I'm like, dude, just even talking about this, just even talking about this is so fucking crazy, because it's so unnecessary. Like, we don't need to go there. That's nuts. That's like, all of a sudden we were living in a Fallout game, and yeah, I really hope that people can just, cooler heads will prevail, and
yeah, hopefully so. We saw when the United States used nuclear weapons, it was because you're talking about world power shifting to let's just face it, an evil axis, right? You had, like, in World War II, you had the Axis powers and the Allied
pretty
powers.
Bad. Imperial Japan was pretty bad.
Imperial Japan, and then also a genocidal regime in fucking
Nazi
Germany, who was literally killing millions of people,
horrendously bad,
and trying to eliminate them out of the human race. Like, that's when, like, if you ask when I think nuclear weapons are justified to be used, that's a situation where that would be an acceptable scenario, but not this conflict that we have going on here. To your point, I think the top priority should be, ending the conflict and with as little bloodshed left as possible, so these poor people aren't dying. Ukraine's been hammered, Peace Corps or whatever the fuck. We're probably all going to be involved in that going forward. But profit incentive and all that is a crazy fucking thing, man. You got Big Pharma with all their incentives during COVID. Then you talked about the military-industrial complex. It's crazy to think the disconnect between morals and reality when it's in the best interest financially of these people to have other people dying or being killed with the very products they make. And the more of it happens, the better. It's like you're talking about death here. Like that means there's no morals. Like the owner of Trader, or not the owner, like the CEO of Trader Joe's wrote a couple of books, and or was it Whole Foods? I always confuse. I think Trader Joe's is owned by Aldi's. Whole Foods is like a separate thing, but whatever. Anyway, the guy who was the longtime CEO, or maybe still is, of Whole Foods wrote these books. One of them is called Compassionate Capitalism or Conscious Capitalism. So it's basically he's saying like, look, I'm going to make a case study here or show you a study of like how corporations can be responsible and have greater longevity without being so cutthroat. Like he's basically saying like, we can do all the same thing and make a lot of money and have like long-lasting brand power and survivable and sustainable corporations without like being cutthroat as fuck. So like maybe like it's a shame that there's a disconnect between the morals of human life and making money on selling things to end human life. It's fucking crazy.
But I don't know how you do that when you're a defense contractor, though. The more conflict, the more profit. Like it's a simple scenario, simple equation.
Yeah.
I think it's different with them. There's no compassionate capitalism or conscious capitalism with these guys. Like there has to be a conflict somewhere in order to justify their existence, or there has to be at least the threat of a conflict somewhere in order to justify their existence. And not just so much their existence. If they did implement the conscious capitalism strategy, they would be fine. Just because we have a huge military budget as is, it just increases even more during times of conflict. And I feel like we need some kind of conflict in order to. It's just crazy. We go from one thing to the next. The amount of conflicts our country has been embroiled in post World War II
one after another.
It just rolls through the decades, throughout the 20th century, into the 21st century. Yeah. It's like nonstop. And Eisenhower said, beware of the military-industrial complex, and we didn't listen to him. Because so here we are.
Because it makes killing profit.
Yeah, to make
profit.
Exactly.
Profit. There's profit in death of human beings. You will make money, and the company and their shareholders will all have a ton of fucking money because people are getting killed using their products. And if once those two things, I think that's what Eisenhower, the crux of his warning was about, is like when you align these two things they're now both in the same, the interest of like having people being killed during war and making money off of it. Once those two things are aligned, that's a fucking moral hazard. Huge because fucking moral hazard.
We will create problems where none are, like Iraq is a great example.
Get involved where we don't need to be.
Exactly. We will just create a problem, or you can debate like the Comophobia era where it's like, oh, we got to stomp out communism where it is. We got to Korean War, Vietnam War. Let's look at Central and South America where all of us we're like fucking afraid of cocoa communism, springing up in some third world country that has no geopolitical like strategic importance to us, but yet we're deploying special forces there to overthrow a fucking government, or assassinating like one of their leaders, or sending arms to their fascist rivals or whatever that are also genocidal assholes. It almost seems like it was an excuse, like communism was an excuse to just make it rain on the defense contractors to fund conflicts elsewhere at the expense of many, many lives. And just all the regime change we've been involved in south of the border is extremely, extremely eye-popping. And, I have some family acquaintances, friends of my family that were involved in these just shit shows, basically, and it's crazy stuff. It really is just the level of our involvement, and it's interesting hearing their stories of what they're involved with and how fucking crazy it was. The shit we were up to was just wild, very 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 wild. I can't really get into any details.
No worries, man.
But
and in fact, that'll kind of segue us into circling back to the Ukrainian victory and taking back. Where did they take back?
Okay, they mounted a successful counteroffensive in the northeast. So they took back areas of the northeast that were formerly controlled by Russian forces. And in response, Vladimir Putin has announced he's going to call up as many as 300,000 reservists to basically address the loss and push back to retake their lost territory. Yeah. So that's crazy. And apparently a lot of people, I guess a lot of those reservists are like, they're getting the fuck out of Dodge, I heard. I haven't looked at the details on it, but it's not a popular war amongst the Russian people, and they don't want no part of this. It's like, okay, I've heard different numbers tossed around by how many soldiers Russia's lost here, but apparently it's in the tens of thousands.
That's a lot.
Safe estimate, we're in the tens of thousands dead already. It's not going well for them. I don't know how well or how not well it's gone for Ukrainians. I imagine it's not as rosy a picture as we hear in our media over there. It would be interesting.
They're fighting a fucking struggle over there.
Yeah, I imagine it's not the landslide that this victory has not come free. It's come at a cost. I know they've lost a considerable amount of their forces as well. Retaking this lost territory, so it's a fucking mess, and it's in everyone's best interest for it to end, but we won't do it. We won't come up with a diplomatic solution to this. We'll continue it for as long as possible. One, to make money on it, and two, to bleed our adversary as much as possible. Russia is a geopolitical adversary, and we want to see them bleed out, and this is doing that for us. So it's we get to see our peer competitor bled, not dry, but hopefully pretty dry, over this conflict, and defense contractors will make a bunch of money on it. So it's a win-win for us. And at the expense of, however much Ukrainian blood. I mean, we were willing to sacrifice American blood in Iraq for years and years and years, so we'll gleefully sacrifice Ukrainian blood for this. Even while waving Ukrainian flags in our front yards. The powers that be don't give a fuck. They could care less.
Well, I'm glad to hear about these victories. You always want to root for the underdog. Crazy that it got to where it got to. And, I didn't really, because it's still ongoing, and I really thought about how it ends. But what to your point is, you really don't hear anybody talking about the end of it. It's just let's keep on waiting and seeing how it goes. What you would want to be is you got fucking Secretary of State going over there to meet with people, talking about trying to end this. You know what I mean? And so really wild times. That this is going on, and the sooner it comes to a resolution, a peaceful resolution, the better. Yeah. And you know what I was going to say is that one thing I wanted to touch on when we were talking about Russia and all this is this an example of propaganda not working well? Because we should definitely look up numbers as, I don't know, I guess we couldn't really get accurate numbers about public opinion in Russia about this war, but there was protesting that was cracked down on. People were going to jail just for speaking freely, holy shit, speaking out against a war. At least here, when people were protesting, they weren't arrested, and some people got annoyed with the Occupy Wall Street and all the different shit that was going on, but at least we could do it without arrest. And then I thought you mentioned the word draft. Is he talking about doing a draft, Putin?
I think it was just calling up reservists. I don't think it was a draft.
I thought I heard
He
you
was
say draft.
activating like 300,000 reservists, though. Yeah.
So I wonder. It's my understanding that Putin and the Russian media were trying to make it seem like Ukraine's a real demon. We need to get in. Or kind of like America with Iraq and weapons of mass destruction. Like, you got to get in. So that's the way I think he's been trying to spin it. But what it seems like is that the Russians are either not buying it, or they're finally kind of seeing like that. No, these people really aren't the enemy. Like, this is not necessary, because, like you're saying, it seems like there's unwillingness to go in and fight this battle to take over Ukraine.
Yeah,
on the Russian side.
I mean, some of the Russian troops are like defecting, like they're just walking away from their posts in like civilian clothes or whatever, trying to just get the fuck out of there. There's a bunch of them apparently trying to flee into Europe and just like leave their post or leave Russia. I don't know the details of it, but like I think Germany just announced that it's ready to take in like Russian refugees, people that are fleeing, being like called up, in this new reservist activation. So they're like, fuck that. I'll just and that is one of the prerequisites to requesting what's the word? Sanctuary, asylum, political asylum, when you're called up to fight in a conflict like that. That's, I guess, from the host country immoral. Germany obviously is on a page with the rest of us, saying that Russia's in the wrong here. So Russian soldiers that want to defect are probably more than welcome into the EU, I imagine. So that's kind of cool.
Interesting, yeah, and it's kind of crazy that you would see people literally defecting from the country to leave there because they don't want to fight a bullshit battle, and it's kind of crazy, and it's something that I'm sure Putin wasn't counting on. Like, you're going to do an invasion like this, basically what you would need is that, like, everybody goes along with it, and they're like all hands on deck are into it. But now what you're saying is that people are literally leaving the country and going to get asylum elsewhere because they don't want to fight in this conflict and they don't believe in it. So very interesting stuff.
Yeah, like you were saying with the protests, I'm just seeing here that more than 1,000 people in Russia have been detained for demonstrating against Putin's mobilization order since protests broke out. That's crazy. Yeah, they're not. I mean, it's really ironic. Like a guy like Vladimir Putin, someone who obviously kind of wants to restore the USSR era of like Russian dominance over the region, and really at a point when I think, at least immediately like post World War II, when Russia and the Allies were victorious over against Nazi Germany, I think there was a lot of national unity in the country. And it's like, I feel like, people don't miss communism, but they miss the USSR and like the patriotism and like national unity that came with that. And I think that's kind of what he's trying to create, just without communism. But it seems like he's really fucking up because he's not creating national unity. He's creating a huge crisis. Like, I mean, he's not uniting the country. The country's against his moves. I mean, if anything, they're united against their government now, like, and against him, because this war is very unpopular, even in the home country. I think from what we're seeing, you wouldn't have people defecting in mass and protesting in mass if it was popular. This is an oopsie. So, but I feel like even though he's bit off more than he can chew, he's going to try to choke it down and just keep throwing bodies at it till he takes at least part of Ukraine. I don't know, because it's like,
wouldn't it be wild if the first time in our history, like, the fucking troops on the ground disobeyed orders and literally started enacting fucking treaties, like, between each other or something like that, or ceasefire agreements. Like, dude, we don't even want to do this, man.
Yeah.
Like, healing after all this suffering they've both been through. It'd be so wild to see that. Like, we're we're not going along with Putin's orders anymore. Just voluntarily withdraw and head back to their country. Can you imagine it?
Yeah.
And what a wild thing too, because like there is no saving face, and this has went so badly that like you're done. Like Putin's done. If it, that's how you said he's going to try to choke it down, probably, because now you're dealing with a desperate person who shit backfired and it didn't go the way they thought it was going to go, and now they're stuck in that position. And it's withdrawal was fucking very defeating for them. Then you know what I mean. So morale, like for Putin, has got to be tough. So this guy, for somebody who's so calculated, I think it's just crazy how badly he miscalculated how this was going to go.
Yeah. I think he really
he thought it was going to be like the Crimea all over again.
Yeah,
it wasn't that easy.
It was always going to be a blitzkrieg into fucking Ukraine, and they would just steamroll them over. But he really didn't have a good situational awareness of the status of his forces, and there's probably a lot of corruption in the ranks, and he thought they were more capable than they were. And they're, I can't believe I'm going to play devil's advocate for this fucking asshole, but they were probably fibbing reports and like metrics reports and briefings up the chain of command, like they were painting a much rosier picture of their forces and their readiness than actually was accurate.
So Putin thought they had force readiness and they weren't really.
He had no force readiness. They probably weren't doing their battle drills.
To serve you.
They weren't doing their battle drills. They weren't doing their maintenance. They didn't have their logistics in place. It's just, if they had done everything they were supposed to do on paper, it would have been a complete landslide, and Ukraine would have gotten steamrolled. But clearly, they did none of that, and were completely unprepared, and did not fucking stick to their military doctrine. Did not do proper maintenance. Did not do logistical planning, and just a hot fucking mess. So, but again, what they were kicking up in terms of their metrics briefings far up the chain of command all the way to Putin was that everything's rosy. We conducted our battle drill, blah, blah, blah. But we really just sat around and drank and sold off the fuel we had. And, we haven't really replaced the tires. The new tires that we got issued, yeah, the guys might have sold those off on the black market, for some extra fucking drinking money. Like, that's probably sounds like the shit that really happened. They just don't have... I don't think he had an accurate accounting of his force readiness, and it was probably a lot of smoke blown up his ass. And there's probably a lot of people that have already been disappeared because of it. I would imagine.
Yeah, that's a nice way of saying killed. And you mentioned the word blitzkrieg earlier. That means lightning war, or at least that's what I remember from like history class. Because I remember my his history teacher talking about the German word blitzkrieg. It means lightning war or whatever, like just onslaught, like a hammering with all the might.
You have to have your shit together to execute a blitzkrieg. Yeah. You have to do your battle drills. You have to be well planned, well resourced, and well trained, which the Germans were. Everything that the Russians are not right now. So blitzkrieg doesn't work when you're ate the fuck up. Like, you just kind of drive into the country, run out of fuel.
This is embarrassing.
You're just like, oh, shit. Well, here I am in my tank with no fuel because I don't have any logistical support. Yeah, I saw that. I saw some of those like videos during the early days of the war where there's just like a tank convoy that just ran out of gas. They're just kind of sitting there, and the Ukrainians like, I can't believe you fucking come here. Like, you guys are assholes. And they're like, yeah, I guess we are. Sorry we're in your country. We had to, like, we were literally conscripted into military service.
Do they speak the same language? Some of them do.
I don't know. I know the Russian.
Sure. Some of them do.
The ethnically Russian parts of Ukraine do, but I don't believe the rest of them do.
Yeah, I wonder how similar the languages are.
Probably
like
close.
Is it kind of like Latin or Spanish and like
Spanish and Portuguese, Spanish and Italian.
Spanish and Italian, where they can kind of understand. They say "Malaka," fuck you guys. But an interesting tidbit that I saw in the news recently is that Germany just nationalized one of the biggest fuel companies or fuel refineries in Germany. I just saw this a couple of days ago, and I kind of like to hear that. Although I'm a conscious capitalist, but I do like to hear when they do that because I love when a country will put its foot down to like a bigger power that be like Mexico nationalized their lithium deposits and mineral rights to those deposits
Yeah.
because China was trying to get their fucking grubby hands all over them, right?
They want to control the fucking
Yeah, they
world,
want
man.
all the
They really
lithium,
do.
right? They want to consume that because they know that the power lies in these resources, so they're trying to get it. And Mexico's like, nope, we're going to fucking nationalize that shit. And
I
then
get
now
that.
Germany just did that, a big fuck you to Russia because they're like, Russia supplies a lot, or maybe most of the fuel, or they had some kind of agreement, and now it's not working out so well. It's like, oh, you're going to fucking do this, so we're not going to be buying this fucking blood money shit over here. Like, now they're stuck with a Russian oil supply,
Yeah.
which is crazy that they're still supplying oil to all these people when they're fucking the neighbors,
Basically
like,
at war with
a
their
few
neighbors.
countries over.
Yeah. But they're so dependent on it, they
I
cannot
know,
take it.
but
Which is kind of
interesting.
funny if you really put your money where your mouth is,
But
So
they
and
nationalized
are,
that company, so
and they are now. So I
you have-
respect that.
do you have an article for that?
Yeah. So the German government is going to nationalize the country's biggest importer of Russian gas, called Uniper, expanding state intervention aimed at preventing an energy shortage because of Russia's war in Ukraine.
So they're the biggest. Repeat that one more time.
Uniper is Germany's biggest importer of Russian gas. So
Okay, interesting. Nationalize the company.
Yep.
Probably because ties between the bad powers within Russia and the company within Germany were like too much to shake during these times, and too much of a national security
I guess so.
concern for Germany. Interesting shit, man.
Yeah. So this step became necessary as the situation changed over the past few weeks. And one official said that conditions have worsened, particularly since Russia halted all gas deliveries through the Nord Stream pipeline in early September. So they're scrambling to come up with solutions.
So Germany's
Interesting.
hurting for fuel,
Yeah.
even though they just nationalized this company, because
Yeah.
obviously, even if they nationalize a company, they can't control the fuel inflow
Right.
to their country. But
Right.
at least they're not going to let that company have a position of power within their country.
It's a panic move, I think. So I'm not sure how they're gonna adjust fire and find a new source. Like, you can buy it from us, guys. We have a lot of it too.
Well, yeah, they're probably going to start buying it from a bunch of other places, because I'm guessing when
Probably
you
the Middle
nationalize
East,
something, those
actually.
contracts are
Yeah.
no longer valid.
Yeah.
It could be the Middle East. It's funny how they could end up coming out, benefiting from this. But yeah, that's interesting. We'll have to see how it goes. I hope that they get a supply for the rest of Europe that really takes power away from Russia.
You know who gives a lot less of a fuck about this than Germany? It's France, because they have so much nuclear power. They're like, oh, that's cute. If you're having fuel problems, I feel bad for you, son. I got 99 problems, but gas ain't one. Yeah, like, get on my level, bitch. But it's funny. Like, Germany had this big green push to go to do all this green energy and stuff, and they shunned nuclear, and they basically just were getting fucking pollutant energy from Russia. It's like, your needs are still what they are. Like, if you want to go that route and you want to shun nuclear like they did, so you can do that, and then just buy. It's just like us, you still have technology being what it is, and you're still gonna have to buy fuel from somewhere, and then you want to make it hard to domestically produce it. Okay, that's cool. Oh wait, where do we have to buy it from now? OPEC dictatorships. Great. We really solved everything. Solved nothing and just made the situation probably worse.
Yeah, literally putting the power
Yeah.
into the hands of your enemies.
Yeah, it's stupid.
Apparently, like they say on the Rogan podcast a lot, that we need clean nuclear. Like, that is and when they say clean
Yeah.
nuclear, I think what they mean is safe nuclear. So that we avoid Chernobyl, and we avoid, there was Fukushima. There was no fail safes in place, and they were literally just getting toasted with nuclear
3 Mile
radiation
Island.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Well, Fukushima was there's an earthquake, a tsunami, and all that. So if you have a nuclear power plant in Ohio or something, none of that is. Japan is a unique scenario because they're at the mercy of the sea and earthquakes and whatnot. So, granted, it's kind of a rare thing, but I forget what the heck happened with Fukushima. It's more complicated than that. I remember it wasn't just they're not just dangerous naturally, because when's the last time you heard of something going wrong in France? Never. Their whole country is relying on it. So, granted, yeah, okay, we had a problem in Chernobyl in a fucking communist-run nuclear plant, and we all know that the communists are not renowned for quality of product in terms of their undertakings. Like, it's not really, they don't really produce the best functioning operations. Let's just
you wanted
say.
a tank, we gave you a tank. What's the problem?
And just Russians in general and maintenance, clearly it's not their thing. So that's why they designed weapons like the AK-47 that don't require much maintenance, because clearly they're shit at maintenance. So in many aspects. But in 3 Mile Island, old tech, like the new nuclear power plants are not even close to the same thing. Like, they're, from what I understand, like there's a lot more like safety measures built into the new power plants, that it's a completely different animal than it was back in the day with these old tech nuclear plants. So it's kind of given a bad stigma to nuclear power, and people just, I guess it just lasted. But it's just like, hey, if the French can do it and reliably without problems, you're saying we can't? Are we that fucking inept as a country that we can't also do that? So but then you'll have the green energy people be like, oh, nuclear is not clean energy, and it's like, you're right, but it's a lot cleaner than fucking gas, than coal, than petroleum products. So it's
probably just there's not as much money in it, or something.
I'm not sure.
I don't know if nuclear power plants are like just raking in the dough or something like that. I mean, they're supplying energy, but like, is the profit incentive just to use the fucking other shit because there's a lot more money in it? Use fucking these fossil fuels and this and that.
If we were concerned about, now granted, we don't produce nearly as much pollution as China, but if we're really concerned about green energy, and it's funny, we have even the administration, high-ranking members of the DoD talking about how climate change is like a national security threat, blah blah. Oh, if it is, well, then instead of blowing like, I don't know, however many hundreds of billions of dollars it was on the Joint Strike Fighter program and the fancy new jet, how about the DoD spend some money on nuclear power plants? How about that? Wouldn't that improve things? Upstart might have the fucking Corps of Engineers, have that as a tasker for the Corps of Engineers to like build nuclear power plants, or at least subsidize their creation in place of coal plants or natural gas, so we don't have to do fracking, But they're not going to do that, and I don't know why. It seems insane to me. So, not sure. We have all this money in the DoD budget. I think it's like 5 times more spent on our military budget than our next near peer competitor, which I believe is China. I think they spend about 1/5 of what we do on their military. So again,
it's kind of crazy. I would think they would try to outspend us there.
If green energy is a national security threat, as the powers that be have said, why aren't you investing in nuclear energy? I don't understand. We said we're investing in a war in Ukraine, but that's cool. Priorities and shit. So.
And then also we got the interest rate hike.
Yes. So
3/4 of a point.
3/4 of a point. What do you think effect is going to have on, like, say, the housing market, for instance? Is this really going to cool shit off, especially now going into fall and the winter when the market typically starts to take simmer down a little bit?
Individual realtors are seeing slowdowns, but we haven't yet. Not yet. Well, yes, we have, but not in a way that has caused me financial stress. Like, I'm not making as much money as I was last year, but I'm getting by and I'm paying my bills, and I'm still comfortable. I'm not in a place where I'm starting to get scared. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know how we don't eventually get like a bad slowdown or a recession. Like, it's like there's only so long this type of shit can continue. Where the cooling effect does have a cooling effect, right? Like they're trying to slow down the amount of money that's circulating because there's so fucking much of it, and you know, after a while, if you make it unaffordable, then it's just gonna be unaffordable. And the funny thing is, you know, it's weird when you hear about like the Great Reset. You'll own nothing and you'll like it, and like everything coming out of COVID, when you start seeing them jacking up the fucking interest rates, you start wondering, like, is this actually, they're just doing it to make it unaffordable. It's probably just cyclical, you know, right? We got bad inflation now, so now they need to fight it. But the fucking chairman of the Federal Reserve, I don't even know the guy's name. I know his face, though.
What is it?
He's like, he's got the white hair and shit.
Yeah.
He's like, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And he's like, unfortunately, this is going to be painful, and we're going to have to crank these up to try to, like, we have to deal with inflation, because otherwise you can let it run amok. So it's like, there's only so many tools. The funny thing is, there's really so many tools within their power to fight it once it's there, because the chairman of the Federal Reserve doesn't spend the fucking money.
It's ultimately on
appropriated
Congress.
by Congress.
Yeah.
Congress just inflates this fucking money, like they're just farting out
It's
dollar
on them.
You know, dollar bills 24 hours a day,
printing
nonstop. It
nonstop,
never stops running. There's only the only two things that never stop moving: fucking time and fucking the printing press for the U.S. dollars or whatever. So now he's stuck with a situation that they have to figure out a solution to. The part about the interest rate hike, to me, is the amount, because I think we talked about this earlier. My understanding is that a normal interest rate hike for the feds would be like a quarter point.
Yeah.
So, and they would do that frequently in order to let those points add up, right? So at their quarterly meeting for quarter one, we're going to do a quarter point interest rate hike. It's quarter two, okay, we'll increase it by another point. Or maybe in the fall we'll increase it, and we'll have 6 months at that quarter point increase. They're going 3/4 of a point. And when it's that drastic, it leads you to believe that the problem is pretty bad that they're trying to fight. Like, inflation is going to get worse. They see a recession coming. And they're actually, the Fed, I think the Fed chief, and I don't want to misquote him, or chairman, said that basically, unfortunately, we're going to be causing a recession, you know, in order to try to beat this inflation. It's going to happen. It's going to be worse before it gets better. It's going to be painful. So, you know, the only question is, how soon does it come? But 3/4 of a point is a lot. It makes that money that much more expensive. Like, if you thought people were hesitant when the rates were going up by like only a quarter point at a time, you start raising it almost 1%. Like, now you're getting real serious increases. And then if they're willing to start doing 3/4 point increases, are they going to get comfortable with that? Like, instead of being a quarter point interest, is it a half point or 3/4 of a point every time, or maybe even a whole point next time? Like, how fucking bad is it going to get?
What I want to know is, what is this actually going to do? Because so inflation hit some of the highest annual rates in 40 years, reaching 8.3% in August. So I get it. This is, you know, they got to, extreme times require extreme measures. But I mean, I get they're saying to try and fight inflation. Okay, what is that? What actual impact will that have on inflation? I wonder. Is it just a Band-Aid on an arterial bleed when it needs a tourniquet? Or, you know, because I just don't know how much influence they have over the overall trajectory of the entire economy and the overall trajectory of inflation in general. Like, is it going to be enough, or is it, again, a Band-Aid on a bleeding artery? I'm not sure. So,
yeah,
are we just all going to suffer even more on our way down? You know, it's like we're going down. Are they just going to make us all suffer while we go down just by beating us up with high interest rates when it doesn't even stem the tide, doesn't turn back inflation? Congress still spends recklessly. They just passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which we all know is not going to reduce inflation. Sorry for anyone who's optimistic about that. It's not. Even the fucking...
it's inflation reduction.
Even the feds admit it won't fucking reduce inflation, except by like 0.01% or something, maybe in a couple of years. Wow. Bravo.
Yeah, more that.
Good job, guys.
Yeah, I don't know. To your point, like, how much are they interconnected? I mean, but the way they explained it was that during COVID, they spent so much, and there was so much government spending and so much money going into hands of people that the government was spending, is that there was too many dollars chasing too few goods.
Yeah. Because
the supplies had been slowed down, they were disrupted. Some of it was just poor planning and amounts of stuff that or amounts of supplies that these businesses are ordering, or that they weren't ordering a lot because of the shutdowns. They didn't need as much as they did before, and now supply and demand kind of lag or get ahead of each other sometimes. And so what they're saying is, like, if the money's more valuable and it costs more to use it, then that should slow the demand down to the point where it matches supply. That's where they're trying to get to. But like you said, to your point, it could just be actually a more painful landing. Like, it could be that we're going into some shit no matter what. But I think if they might not be able to control, like, individual parts of the big picture other than just the raising interest rates, that may be the only thing these motherfuckers can do to try to make supply match demand.
Yeah.
But we haven't had a recession in a long time. I mean, I don't even know this if we really look at it, like, objectively, just on the simple numbers, I don't know when the last time we had a real recession was. Since the last crash.
Yeah,
we had the crash, which was they call that an actual there's a recession and then there's a depression. They were saying that was depression level shit, where we were heading. Well, obviously, government stepped in and helped out, but and bailed out that from happening to go from a real depression. But they said in terms of severity of what was going on at the time, that was a depression level, like, economics were going on then. So that was the last time we had a recession. We're in 2022 right now. So cyclically speaking and historically speaking, you're due for a recession. It's just that there's a lot of other factors that we're dealing with right now that'll make it harder for people to deal with, right? We just came out of COVID. Literally, our minds have been fucked for like 2 years straight, and we've been dealing with physical disease, a very nasty little motherfucker of a disease too, right?
No joke.
That can kill you, if it's bad enough, or if you have the best of luck, it's just a mild thing and you're non-symptomatic. Some people are just straight up non-symptomatic; they didn't even know they had it. But in any event, we just came out from dealing with that. So having to deal with that on top of now financial stress, it's this nasty shit, perfect storm, this shit storm we're dealing with. And so maybe it'll be more painful, even though, like, a recession under normal times would just be, it's going to be hard out there for a pimp for a while, and then we'll fucking get back at it, once this is over. But it is what it is, I guess. It's like, but it's going to be harder to deal with, I think, because I know I wouldn't want to be coming, after everything we just went through, literally, like, forced against our will to have these shutdowns and shit for way longer than they should have went on. And now that we're back to it, you're just handicapping us in another way. Fucked up. It's gonna be interesting how people deal with this, and how bad will it get is the interesting question, because we haven't had a recession at all in that many years. Like, is it going to be a bad one now since we had that long? Like, is the length of your time where you don't have a recession proportional to how bad the recession is going to be when you finally get it then? I don't think so necessarily, but this one, there's just so many factors at play that could make this a worse recession. But we're heading toward there. One estimate I was watching Brian Buffini's masterclass on real estate, and he seemed to say, if I remember correctly, that he thinks we'll be in a full-blown recession by summer 2023. So that means enjoy the fucking Christmas and your family, your fucking holidays, and then literally right when it's fucking nice out, everybody get ready to go outside and enjoy outdoor activities and just have fun, and don't think about your money, because if we go into a recession, you just got to keep your fucking mind off it. Try to work hard, have a backup plan, save some money. I don't know. It's hard to fucking save money now.
Yeah.
It's very hard to save money. It's easy to lose it, though.
It's time for us to start looking into other areas of law.
Looking into it, we are looking into it. We're going to be, just because I don't want to be a fucking one-trick pony that's not recession-proof. Right? We have to be doing these veterans' disability appeals, more estate planning, changes in title, small cases that'll be easy for us to handle. Obviously, we're not a huge firm. We don't have a lot of resources. We're not going to be taking on,
no class action lawsuits for us.
We're not your guys to handle a class action against Ford Motors, but we'll fucking, if you have a problem that related out of your real estate sale or something like that, we'll be handling those, and evictions maybe too. We'll do a podcast with Felix Gonzalez. I think you'll like the guy. Had him on before. He's an attorney in the area. Shout out to Felix Gonzalez, and he'll tell us the current state of affairs. And I just talked to him the other day for a friend of mine. I talked to him on Friday because my friend needed to know about notice in Cook County. And just a note while we're on the topic, City of Chicago passed a law in July 2020 changing the amount of notice you have to give people for rent increase or lease termination when they have expired leases. If you've been in a property longer than 6 months, but less than 3 years, you have to get 60 days notice to either increase the rent or to terminate the landlord-tenant relationship. Furthermore, if you've been in the property, if your tenants have been in the property longer than 3 years,
Long time.
you have to give them 120 days notice, which is 4 months, and the county of Cook has enacted what we call mirror legislation. So basically, even if you're not in Chicago, the entire county of Cook now has the same notice requirements. I don't think they're acceptable notice requirements. And they're never...
Long notice.
Yeah, this wasn't
4
even
months
temporary.
is
They didn't even pretend that it was going to be a
time.
temporary thing. They're just like, okay, well, we're in the recession now, and we don't want poor people protesting in the street or tenants are protesting when they're getting kicked out, so we're doing the eviction moratorium, putting the whole burden on fucking landlord. Even when there was assistance available, you usually needed the tenants to sign off on it, is my understanding. Like, I had a guy, he didn't even want to apply. It's like, fucking apply, dude. If as a matter of honor and paying somebody back, like, wouldn't you rather have the hard work of applying, whatever hard work it would be, versus the dissatisfaction of knowing that you're not honoring obligations and paying people?
Yeah.
But the fucking government steps in, they do this. I believe that those notice requirements need to be repealed and they need to go back to things as normal, because the longer that we have unusual laws on the books, the longer it's going to take back to get to normal.
I think they're going to stay in place, honestly. I don't think they're going anywhere.
We'll talk more about, my thoughts on combating that, but yes, it's once those changes occur, it's very hard to get rid of them, and it's always during these fucking times where people are in a compromised position, like during COVID, that they enact this shit and then it never goes away. They weren't even pretending like this shit is temporary. They haven't said anything about repealing.
Mm-hmm.
That's not even a thought. Like, they're just like, okay, that's a law now. It's going to stay that way. But it's I believe it's unfair to working people who own property and are trying to make a living. Like, it's a deprivation of property without just cause, I feel. But in any event, yeah, so the county now has the same legislation. But Felix will be able to tell us about current affairs, and it sounds like he's now moving his eviction cases along more quickly. So that might be another thing that we can do, because, like, I had another attorney I got an attorney friend of mine started a group message with me and another attorney, and we're talking about fees and charging, and he's like, man, I'm starting to switch over and do more evictions. He's like, I make more money with less stress and less headache, and less work and actual involvement than I do, by doing evictions than I do fucking, doing the real estate closings.
Really?
Which real estate closings, we'll probably talk more in depth about it in the future. It's a changing climate within the real estate industry here, and they're trying to take attorneys like us. We work hard and we make more money on the seller side, but there's a lot of forces at play within the industry that are trying to take that away or step into that field. And if that's the case, it's not going to be we're not going to be able to make a living. So by necessity, we must branch out. But in any event, if our fees are reduced, then we can increase our own attorney fee to kind of keep up with it. But you can only increase to what the market will bear. If you get to a point where your services are too expensive, then people might say, you know what,
elsewhere.
The realtors all negotiate their repairs. We'll pay an attorney by the piece instead of having them retained. And when we need them or something, and other than that, they'll be out of it. And we'll negotiate the inspection repairs, and then the attorneys will be out of it. If you overprice yourself, so there'll be obviously more pressure then. And another problem about attorney fees is that, unfortunately, in Cook County, and I think Chicago as well, there's price control legislation about how much people can pay in closing costs as a proportion or percentage of their loan. So we're up against that too. You start raising that fee too much, and
You're gonna hit a ceiling.
Yeah, you're gonna hit a ceiling, because the banks will tell you, like, hey, much respect, we like you, we like the service that you offer, but as a matter of law, you can't charge that, because we're going to run into issues here. There's other things that need to be, like, we need to be able to charge the fees because we're making it happen because we got the money. But if you're a secondary service provider in effectuating this, they're just going to tell you can't do it, because they're like, if you're going to get paid that much, you're going to have them pay you outside of closing the rest of it. You can only have so much on paper probably, because on some of these lower price transactions, they have the high cost law. So it's like on a loan that's like $100,000 or under, or a property like that, like the costs get too high, and Cook County says no. We've set regulation that banks won't be able to charge this much on a. And I think that the problem is, I think it was more geared toward protecting people from banks that were just overcharging on fees.
Yeah.
But then all the other people who charge fees as part of a closing are getting fucked as a result. So now it's like you'll have the lender share will be the biggest portion. What about the homeowner's insurance? What about the attorney? What about whoever, you know? So it is what it is. There is a changing landscape. I will continue enjoying it while it lasts, and doing my best to make a living in there, and just I enjoy the time, the years that I've had so far in the business, and being able to make money doing this for a living. And but we will together prepare for change, so that that we are prepared and we're not getting caught by surprise, or we're not completely screwed when the day comes that maybe real estate closings aren't a thing here. It almost shifts to a non-attorney state, as opposed to an attorney state for real estate closings, or whatever. Maybe the other actors within the industry, realtors or whatever, have just taken up so much of the business and the money they would normally get that it's just not worth it anymore. We'll see what happens, but we'll enjoy it until then. Anything else, Thomas, you want to leave people with before we sign off?
Nothing for me, man. That's all I had. So
what a thorough release we've had here today.
It's been a marathon, yeah. I think that's the longest one, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. This is going to be divided up into shorter amounts of time and aired as multiple episodes. So when I'm out of town, we'll have still podcasts that we can put out. And great stuff, man. Talking is exhausting. I bet those girls got out of here like, Jesus Christ, I'm a mom. I got all this shit going on, and I'm like, I'm fucking exhausted from just talking for 3 hours straight.
Yeah.
And plus we're tired coming out of Oktoberfest, still fucking dragging. So I'm actually proud of how well I was able to perform and articulate my thoughts today, despite the fact of just being being tired. And I love doing this, and I just wish that I was more well rested when we do it. But it always seems that we're doing it on days where we've been out late the night before or whatever. I want to bring that best energy.
My brain's a little bit scrambled today. I'm not 100%. I'm still kind of just like, oh.
I think I kind of caught a little bit of a second wind here, but I know I need a real good night's sleep tonight. I think we both have closings tomorrow. I think there's 3 of them. I'm going to take 2.
Yeah. I got a 9 a.m. I know.
Yeah, so we're going to wrap this up and friggin' get your rest, man. Before I leave here, I'm going to eat real quick, and then I'm going to go probably grab my dog and bring him over to my ma's and just spend some time with her, and then I got to finish my goddamn taxes and get ready for the week ahead. But the revelations we made with our software, I'm so excited about.
I'm stoked.
The efficiency gains that we're going to have now, like...
Yes.
So we're going to be able to manage the business so much better now, and that will then allow us to start branching out. And so good things ahead, Thomassen. Cheers,
damn
brother.
Straight. Fucking yeah. Prost.
So kindness and respect are some of the most valuable currencies we have, and yet they are free. The question is, how much do you want to invest? I say as much as you can, as often as you can, and I do it all the time, to be nice to each other. And you can't control, the election or who's the president or who's doing this or doing that, but you can control the way you treat everyday people when you walk by them within your community and outside of your community. And I've gotten, along with so many different people of so many different cultures just by being kind and respectful. It's possible for you too. Good people make each other good, and so be good to yourself, be good to your family, be good to your community, and tune in next time to the Blue Podcast, the Blessed Life University Podcast. Thanks for listening. We love you guys. Peace out.
Peace.
Peace.